Hello everybody and welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be doing my May wrap up. Now before I talk about the books that I've read in this month, I just want to discuss something which could probably be a video in its own right, and I think I have talked about this but ages ago on my channel, like historic videos. But I don't tend to rate my books. I tend not to give them a star rating. I find it very difficult to. I am potentially looking into maybe rating using G from Book Roast's core pile system, which I know a lot of YouTubers use, where you break down out of 10 several different aspects of the book, so plot, characters and various different things, and then that will overall give you an average like star rating. So I'm potentially thinking of looking into using that system to give myself star ratings. But I've always thought that rating a book is very much in the here and now, and in a month or two's time when I've potentially read something else, my thoughts on another book might be different. And so I tend not to rate books because I think you're ever changing as a person and as a reader, and I feel like rating it in the here and now is only for the here and now, if that makes sense, and that could potentially change. And I do find that 5 is not like, I don't think it's a big enough scale either, because giving someone a 3-star rating, giving a book a 3-star rating is still really good, but people think, oh, you're giving it a 3 so it's not a good book. So I feel like we should really scale them on 1 to 10. I think there'd be a little bit more of a better scale, I don't know. Anyway, so at the moment I'm filming this on the last day of May, so the 31st of May. I have currently read 11 books, but I am potentially planning on picking Heartstopper Volume 3 up by Alice Oseman. This is a graphic novel. This is, like I said, Volume 3. I read the first 2 volumes, I think, in March when we first went into lockdown, and really enjoyed it. I think I was gifted this copy. Yeah, I was very kindly gifted this copy from Steph Loves through one of the wishlist groups that I'm part of on Bookstagram, and I'm planning on potentially picking this up this afternoon, this evening, but I'm not sure if I'm actually going to get it all. I think I can get it all read, but I mean, it's getting later and later as I'm sat here filming. I'm like bulk filming loads of videos, so we'll see. I think I will try and at least start it. If I can't finish it, which I probably will be able to, then at least I've got a head start on something for June. But make sure to check out my weekly reading vlogs, which I've been doing for the last 3-4 weeks now, and I've been really enjoying doing them. Every week's been slightly different so far, but make sure to check that out because there'll be a little bit more info if I do read this and what my thoughts are on it. So going into then the May reads, like I said, I'm not going to be giving you a star rating on the books, but I'm going to give you my thoughts and kind of give you a word rating, like, really like, love, really love. That's kind of like, you can gauge my enjoyment from, I think, the words I'll use to describe them. So I did take part in the paperback games hosted by Perfect Paperbacks Emma. I've mentioned it in a couple of my weekly reading vlogs. But the first book I read in the month of May was Obsidio by Amie, Kaufman and Kristoff. This is the 3rd book in the Illuminae files, which basically is a case study all about a space attack, basically, an organisation that basically there's a space attack right at the beginning of the first book, and it's the fallout from that. These are made out of mixed media, so emails, instant messages, transcripts, video surveillance footage, and there's even a character in the 2nd and 3rd book that keeps a journal, and she draws in her journal, so you even get some of her sketches. Really, really, really interesting concept. This isn't my favourite book in the series, but if I was to rate the series as a whole, really, really enjoyed it, really recommend it. I think the 2nd book, Gemina, was so fast-paced and so kind of like action-packed. Not saying that this wasn't action-packed, but I think there was so much going on in Gemina that then this one kind of, for me, on the kind of pacing-wise, like what was going on and the action-packed stuff, it kind of fell a little bit flat compared to Gemina. But I did enjoy it still, and I enjoyed it as a roundup to the series, and it was a good conclusion to the series, but not my favourite in the series. Does that make sense? I hope that makes sense. I'll go into it more if you want me to in another video, if you want me to talk about the whole series. So the 2nd book that I read is actually an ebook, and if I am clever enough, I'll try and put a picture of the cover here, but I might not be clever enough to do that, so bear with me on that one. But I read, it was just like, it was probably one of like the free BookBub selections. I get a BookBub email every week, and there's all the deals, the weekly deals, and I often, if there's a free book and I like the sound of the synopsis, I kind of call them like trashy romancy ones that don't have that many pages, nice fillers between maybe some more dense heavy historical fiction or fantasy or whatnot. And I read Whiskey River Rescue by Justine Davis, and it was literally 264 pages long. It wasn't even that long, and it was light and fluffy. It had a, you know, had romance in there. There was a flawed characters, and yeah, it was just the fluff I think I needed. I think I just needed a little bit of fluff, and there was a couple of times where I had periods of time where I couldn't turn a light on, so I just read it on my phone, and it was just a nice stopgap book. So the next book that I read, to be fair, I probably read that book in between reading this book, and it was just when I was maybe not quite in the right place for this. So the next book that I read was Into the Wilderness by Sarah Donati. I don't know how to say her surname, I'm really sorry. This is the first book in the Wilderness series. This follows a character called Elizabeth Middleton. She travels to her father's homestead in northern New York State. It's called Paradise, I believe, and he's got this land. He has settlers that have come, and they've cultivated the land, and Elizabeth has grown up in England, and it's the first time that she's visiting her father's settlement. She's in her late 20s, she's not married, and she has visions of being a school teacher on the land. And this was recommended to me by somebody on Bookstagram, because they said it was very like Outlander-esque, which I love, and it's got ties with the Kenyan Kahaka, so the Mohawk, the Native Americans, and it was just amazing. I loved this. This had romance in it, kind of political stuff in it, the kind of ideas of social standing, like where you stand in society, deeming then what you should or shouldn't do, who you should or shouldn't be with, who you should or shouldn't marry. The idea of race and the Kenyan Kahaka and the attitudes towards them from some of the other white settlers, and I'm not saying that in a racist way, it's just a way of describing, it's how they are described in the book. And there was also a really nice nod to Outlander in this. So one of the characters, Nathaniel, it comes into contact with Ian Murray, who's a character from Outlander, Claire, Jamie, and it was just a really nice nod to have them included in there as well. Really nice. Really enjoyed the start of the series. So much happened, and it was just amazing. It's kind of a similar sort of writing style. It's so descriptive, and you really feel like you're there. They spend a lot of time in the wilderness, funnily enough, these characters, and you just feel like you're part of that. You're there with them. Amazing story, and so like at times so like heart in your mouth, because you're like, oh my gosh, like we need this issue resolved. And I love this, and it was chunky. Like this was like nearly 900 pages, I think 870 odd page, 876 pages, and I loved every page of it. And the pages were so thin as well, they're like Bible pages. Anyway, really recommend this if you like historical fiction, if you're interested in 1790s America, if you're interested in the Kenyan Kahaka as well. Really highly recommend this series. Anyone that's kind of in a bit of an Outlander drought, because we've got no new TV show, we've been waiting for the next book, it's a great stopgap for you. Then the next book that I read was A Court of Thorns and Roses. I decided to pick this up because I was finding there was times during the day when potentially my other half would maybe be making a bit of noise, or he was also watching a TV show, Vikings, which I wasn't watching as closely as he was. I missed too much of it here and there from not being here when he watched it, falling asleep and stuff like that. So I kind of watched it tentatively every time that there was like a big thing happened, you know, I'd be watching it. But I was listening to this on audio and following along. I read Crescent City, I think the month before. I think I read that in April, and I just wanted to launch straight back into Sarah J Maas worlds, and I decided to reread this series. Should probably have decided to pick up Throne of Glass and get through that as a series, because I haven't got through that, but no, I decided to pick up A Court of Thorns and Roses. It's my favourite. I have read Throne of Glass, and I think the second one is that called Crown of Midnight, and I can't really remember a lot what happens. I kind of feel like I'd have to reread 2 books to be able to start making more progress. And I just love this series more than the first 2 books of Throne of Glass. I know I've been told it gets better, so I do need to make the effort to get through that. But I was really interested with rereading because I read this a couple of years ago originally, and I was worried that I wouldn't like it so much. But I actually really love it. I really loved rereading it. It's not the best book ever, but it was just what I needed after having a Sarah J Maas hole, after reading and finishing Crescent City, House of Earth and Blood. It was all that I needed, and it was really interesting rereading it, having a bit more information second time round. So having read the whole series, you kind of know a bit more going into the first book, and that was an interesting change to the way that I read it, and that was really interesting as well. So if you're into a bit of fairies, a bit of smut, a bit of romance, and you don't want anything too taxing to read, I really do recommend this. And it's not a massive book, this one, so quite a quick, easy read for me too. So the next book that I read was for the Be Happy book club that I'm part of on Facebook, and Chloe, the girl that runs the group, is also on Bookstagram as well. Be Happy Read. I read How to Fall in Love with a Man Who Lives in a Bush by Emmy Abrahamson. This is actually a translated text, and this is potentially the longest titled book I think I've ever read. This is kind of what it says on the cover. It is about a woman called Julia. She lives in Vienna, and she is an English teacher. She's originally from Sweden, and she's teaching English in Austria. So she's really like multilingual. She can talk a lot of languages, and basically she falls in love with a man who is homeless, who lives in a bush, and it's all about their story, prejudices towards him and his station, and it's actually based on a real story. So the author, actually, this is her true story. I did enjoy this book. This is kind of one I'd say was a bit middle of the road, and if I was rating it out of 10, I'd probably say it was about a 6. Or like maybe a 3-star if I was rating it out of 5. I read the author's note at the end, and she talked about the true way that they really did meet, and because this is based on their story, there were some inaccuracies with the actual story which kind of bugged me a little bit when I was done with it, but there was just a lack of kind of connection to the characters. I think that's just potentially a translation issue, I don't know, but makes it maybe also a cultural issue. There was a couple of things that were mentioned throughout the book which I just didn't understand, I didn't get, and there was a couple of things I did have to Google, and that's, I think, it's just a cultural thing. You know, Emmy being Swedish and having lived in Austria, not just knew that, but there was a couple of things I had to go, I don't really get that, and I had to Google it. But still very interesting, and something very different from what I think my normal reading zone, my normal comfort zone. So I'm glad that I did read it, and I missed the evening when we did the discussion on this, and now I feel like it's too late to go back and read everyone's comments and comment my own things because it's done and dusted, and there's another book discussion happening. So I'm really bummed I missed that, but I'm definitely going to go back through and read some of the people's comments because I had lots of thoughts on it as I was reading it. So yeah. And the next book I picked up was for the Timeless Book Club. This is also hosted by Perfect Paperbacks Emma, where we read historical fiction, and we read The Lilac Girls by Martha Hall Kelly. We haven't actually done a live show for this yet. If there has been one, I've missed it, so I need to just double check that. This is about 3 women and how they are affected by the Second World War. We have a character called Caroline. She works in basically the French consulate in New York. We have Kasia, who is a Polish teenager, and then we have Herta, who is a German doctor. It's very interesting having the 3 ladies' perspectives because you've got 3 very different perspectives. Caroline in New York is working at the French consulate. She has French heritage, and she's working with displaced French people, and obviously when the war starts and then eventually France does get taken over by the Nazis, it's very interesting to see how that affects her and her job. And she's also an older lady. I think she's in her 40s, and she does a lot of charity work for various different charities. Cassia obviously is a Polish girl. She is taken to Ravensbrück concentration camp, which was a concentration camp just for women. And Herta is a German doctor who ends up being a doctor at Ravensbrück concentration camp. This depicts a story mainly of the rabbits, so a group of women that were basically operated on and tested on, basically guinea pigs. The idea being in the concentration camps that they were working on ways to try and cure potential battlefield illnesses and injuries. And it's basically all about that really as the underlying story. But it's really interesting having a Polish person who's been brought to the camp, but also a German doctor who's working at the camp, and those two different ideas. Very, very interesting. Again, did really enjoy this one. And enjoyed it, but be warned, because it does span quite a large period of time. It goes, I think, right to the late 50s, 58 I believe. Yeah, so it's like at the end it's like 1959, so it spans not just the war but then how the war has affected all of them as well, which is really interesting, and I'm really glad that we had that side to it as well, because it tied up a lot more about the characters. And what was really interesting is that both Herta and Caroline are real people of history. And Cassia, the Polish girl that's taken to the concentration camp, she is formed from lots of research done about the people that were at the concentration camp. So she's not a real character in herself, but she is based off of accounts and real people's accounts, real life accounts of what they went through at Ravensbrück. So really highly recommend this if you're into World War II fiction. It is an area of the historical fiction that I really do find very interesting. I say I enjoy it. And I find sometimes that's maybe a little bit insensitive, but it's really interesting to see our true history depicted in a fictional way. I really find it very interesting. So highly recommend this one as well. The next book I read, I believe this was my prompt for a hyped book for the paperback games, and that was A Court of Mist and Fury by Sarah J Maas. I just needed another audiobook, and I was like, oh, stuff it, I'm just going to pick up the next book in the ACOTAR series. So I read this, and again, really enjoyed my reread. Again, having known a little bit more, and I think I was kind of like, I was gunning for something. If you've read the series, you'll know I was gunning for something to happen, and I didn't think it happened so late in the book, but really enjoyed it. Again, rereading it a second time, and loved it just as much, if not maybe even a little bit more than I did the first time round. And I'm not going to pick up Akawa, and I haven't picked up Akawa, A Court of Wings and Ruins just yet, because I haven't got any Audible credits, and I had other books on my TBR I had to get to for the rest of the month. But enjoyed this reread, and will get to Akawa soon. Kind of feel like I need to read Akawa now before I can start on making more progress through Throne of Glass. So I've kind of shot myself in the foot a little bit there. So the next book that I read was Dawn on a Distant Shore by Sara Donati, and this, I believe, fulfilled my prompt for the paperback games to read a book that involves an adventure. This involves travel and adventuring on the high seas, so I thought this was perfect for that. This is the second book in the Into the Wilderness series. Yes, it is a disgusting cover. Go and watch my one of my most recent weekly vlogs, because I show you all how my covers are so mismatched. This was a great second book, kept me on my toes the whole way through. This was a bit shorter, and I feel like this one I read through it quite quickly and loved it just as much as the first, if not maybe even a little bit more, just because the story's growing and progressing and characters are growing and we're just building. Yeah, it's amazing. Really enjoy this series. Can't wait to get on to the third installment in June. And like I've said before, highly recommend it if you're interested in sort of 1790s. I mean, this one, I don't want to give away spoilers, but the characters end up in a foreign country, and it was just amazing. Really was. And just how the story unfolded was just, it's very Joanna Gabaldon-esque, the way that things progress and grow, and love this. Not a lot else to say about that apart from loving it. I then read, I wasn't sure I was going to get to my whole TBR I'd set myself, because I was reading so much extra, like the second Into the Wilderness book and Akatar and Akamath rather, that I didn't know if I was going to get to some of the books that I put on my kind of written TBR for May, but I did actually manage to get to them all bar one. And the next book I read was My Dark Vanessa, which I'd put on my TBR but then kind of sidelined it for picking this up, and but managed to have enough time left where I could actually read this. So if anyone that doesn't know, this is about a girl called Vanessa who at the age of 15 has a sexual relationship with one of her teachers, with her English teacher, and the story is told through multiple timelines. So you have like a current timeline. So the second timeline does start in 2000, kind of at the beginning of Vanessa's relationship with her English teacher. But the two timelines, obviously, we go from 2000 and we go on in time. So we still keep the constant of 2017, but then the kind of like historical timeline does go on linear in a chronological order from beginning of their relationship to the end. So what was really interesting, that you're having some kind of current day sections and then going back in time and kind of knowing sometimes a bit more than the character in the situation. This has got massive trigger warnings for sexual abuse, rape, paedophilia, if that's childish paedophilia. If that's something you're not into, then I would really not recommend this book. But it was so interesting to see the kind of dynamic between the two characters, this relationship, how this man was able to groom this girl, yet she was very much in love with him, even though she saw faults with their relationship and faults with some of the things that they did. She still looked back on it retrospectively as a very loving relationship and that they had true love. But the beginning of the story, we see Vanessa in her current time. She's in her early 30s, I believe. Yeah, she's 32, and it's coming to light. There's lots of information coming forward about some allegations towards the man that she had a relationship with. So it kind of brings everything back to the surface, and that's kind of what the catalyst is of this story. Very, very interesting, very scary, and very eye-opening to people that have been through something traumatic or something abusive. Kind of like the lasting idea at the end of this book is that it's not necessarily something you get over ever, but you learn to kind of grow and move on from that in your own way, and it's different for everybody. Very, very interesting and very eye-opening. And if you are interested in maybe some more dark, if you're interested in some more dark contemporary, then highly recommend this, but this isn't for the faint-hearted. And like I said, if any of those trigger warnings could potentially affect you, then it wouldn't be one that I'd pick up. But very interesting and, like I said, very worrying, very eye-opening. So if you don't know, I feel like I'm a bit of a broken record with this, but I am reading a Poldark book a month. There are 12 Poldark books. There are 12 months in the year. I was very kindly gifted the books for my brother for my birthday after Outlander. We watched the Poldark series on the TV last year, and decided to ask for the books for my birthday in October, and very kindly was gifted them. And so I have been reading a Poldark book a month. So the 5th book in the series is The Black Moon. I don't want to give too much away about this series because obviously this is the 5th book in a series. If you're interested, it starts with Captain Ross Poldark, who has been fighting in America in the American Revolution. He comes back to Cornwall, his homeland, after the war. Everyone thinks he's dead. He was badly injured in the war and he's got a scar down the side of his face, and lots of people think he was dead. He comes back. His father has died whilst he's been away, and things aren't quite as they were when he left. And basically the story is a flow-on of his life and the area that he lives in of Cornwall, kind of going on through the years, and how basically all the repercussions of just normal life, really. Ross Poldark is a bit of an interesting character in that he's kind of a higher society, but he's very much a man that likes to befriend like the lesser people in society, and he's kind of a bit of a black sheep in that sense. But this book I did enjoy, but I did find it just a bit slow. What intrigued me about this one, I think I talked about this in one of my reading vlogs, is that this was actually written, Winston Graham wrote the first 4, almost like back to back, and then left it for quite a long time, and then came back to the characters because there was quite a lot of loose ends. And he came back, I think, between 15 and 20 years later, and started writing again. So that's quite an interesting concept to me because I'm a bit of a nerd. Can you tell? So I was really intrigued by that, but I didn't feel like it was newer because we're talking about a historical period of history. I didn't necessarily feel like it was that much newer. Maybe it felt slightly newer in some of the writing nuances, but not massively. Like I said, we're talking about Cornish people, like their dialect and stuff in the 1790s, and that kind of, you can't really write that much differently. So it was a little bit slow, but I still enjoyed it, and maybe felt like maybe I just overdid the historical fiction a little bit, and reading 2 wilderness books in the month maybe detracted a little bit from this. But they're all quite important factors into the bigger story and the biggest timeline. If I was to look back on all of the books, I don't think I could differentiate between one to another, to be perfectly honest, because they kind of just all merge into one. But we're going to get closer now to, especially in next month, to where I haven't watched the TV show going forward. So not the whole book series has been made into a TV series. So that will be interesting to see as we get to a point when I don't know what's going on, because I knew what was going to roughly happen in this book. So, but still enjoyed it, and still recommend the series as a whole. Again, if you're interested in this period of history, 1790s Cornwall, very interesting. The last book before this, Ross was a bit of a bad guy, so it was quite nice to see Ross being a bit of a nicer man. And then finally this morning I finished Down Among the Sticks and Bones by Shauna Maguire. This is the second published book in the Wayward Children series. I'm reading them in publication order. If you don't know the series, it's basically about children who find doors to portal worlds. And the first book, Every Heart a Doorway, is about a school where children who have all been through these kind of portal doorways, they've come back to Earth. They've come back to Earth, I suppose. And they all are struggling to rehabilitate themselves in this country, in this world. A lot of the worlds are sort of nonsensical or very different from what we know as normal, and so there's a special school for them to go to, the School of Wayward Children, and they're all trying to find their way back to the worlds that they've been living in. This book is technically a prequel because it follows the story of Jack and Jill, who are in the first book, but this is their story, their origin story of them, how they were born, their growing up, and how they got to their portal world, what happened whilst they were in the portal world, and how they came back. We know they came back because of the first book, but I'm reading them in publication order, which is quite interesting. I like this series. The series, I think, has quite a lot of criticism for not having a lot of detail. Someone that loves historical fiction, Diana Gabaldon, Sarah Donati, I like my descriptions. I still find that even though these are small, and I mean this one was less than 200 pages, 180 something, I think, I still feel like there's enough, and I kind of enjoy the brevity to a degree in these. I feel like enough is said and you still get enough of a gist of the characters and the plot. And I think in these it's more about the bigger story as a whole, like the series as a whole, than like each individual book. But I do feel that these are a bit overpriced, to be fair, for what they are. But enjoying the series and enjoying to hopefully continue the series on in June. And make sure you check out my June TBR to see what I plan on reading in June. But yeah, I enjoyed this and finished it this morning. I started it yesterday. I probably could have finished it yesterday, to be fair, but I gave myself a break and thought, no, it's fine, you still got a couple of days left. Finish it this morning, and I did. I had like 50 pages left to read this morning, and I enjoyed it, and I'm interested to see how the story's going to go on and progress on further. So like I said, I do intend to pick up Heartstopper Volume 3 this evening, but I'll definitely wrap up in my weekly vlog whether I do get to this or not, and how much of this I do get read or not, as the case may be. It's like it's gone 5 o'clock already, so let's see. I'll do my best. So thanks for watching this video, guys. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you like the format. Please, if you have any suggestions on formatting it differently, or if there's something else you'd prefer, please let me know. But what did you get read in May? Did you read anything fantastic? Did you read anything that was a little bit meh? I'd love to hear about it. Please make sure you give this video a like if you enjoyed it, and don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. But thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you in my next one. Bye!